Well, people love lists, right? And if there's one thing I know about college football fans, they love top 25 lists. Way too early top 25, preseason top 25, whatever. I mean, you had top 25 polls coming out literally the day after the national championship game. And I get it. I like to look at the top 25 polls too, whenever they come out, no matter who puts them out. So I get it. I just think it's kind of pointless to be putting out 5, 10, 15 different preseason top 25 polls over the course of the 7 or so months between games. I typically do 3 off-season top 25 rankings a year. I do a post-National Signing Day top 25. That's coming up now. I do a post-spring game top 25. And then I do a final like preseason poll a month or so before the season starts. I mean, these people that do these top 25 polls like the day after the national championship game, like I said, I get it. They do it because they know people are going to watch it. But what do you really know about a team the day after a national title game? You don't know. The full signing class has not been signed. You don't know who's transferring out, who's transferring in. Are there going to be coaching changes, whether it's head coach, coordinators, position coaches? It's literally, I mean, it's always a guess, but it just seems pointless to me to do it. At least after signing day now, we have a pretty good idea of the transfers as far as who's going where, who's leaving where. Yes, there are still plenty of people available in the portal and rosters will change. Most of the coaches are in place. I feel like you have at least enough information to try to do an educated top 25 now. That's what I'm going to try to do. And then again, after the spring games, when you watch all the teams play in the spring, or their quarterback battles that maybe you can figure out after the spring, things like that, which incoming freshmen look really, really good in the spring and may be able to help the team in this upcoming season, that kind of thing. And then, of course, right before the season starts, you've been through a complete off season, and you know, that's probably the closest you'll get to an accurate top 25. But I'm going to give it a shot today with my post-signing day 2022 college football top 25. Let's go.
The champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here!
Oh yeah, good morning in that though, but it is Uncle Lou here though. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, and guess what? I'm live for you on LouTube today, so thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also, and in addition to that as well. Subscribe to this channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year. Some of them are even watchable. I don't know about this one. You can let me know down in the comments what you think about this video at the end. Make sure you let me know which teams you think I got wrong or right. Don't just tell me I'm wrong. You know, tell me where the team should be, or, you know, oh, such and such is ranked too high. Okay, well, where would you have them ranked? Let me know in the comments down below. This is just one idiot's opinion. I'm going to do this video the same way I do almost all of my top 25 ranking videos. I'm going to go through the top 10 first, starting at 10 and working my way down to number 1. And I'm going to try to explain to you as best I can why I have each team ranked where I do in the top 10. I don't do that to try to get you to agree with me. The reason I do that is because I see a lot of complaints about top 25 polls. One of the biggest ones I see is that there's no explanation as to why somebody ranks a team where they do. So again, you don't have to agree with where I have these teams ranked, but at least you'll know why, in my mind, they deserve to be ranked where I have them. And after I count down from 10 through 1, I will just put 11 through 25 up on the screen. Because I try to explain where I have the teams ranked, or why I have the teams ranked within the top 10 where I do, the video would just be way too long to provide an explanation for all 25 teams. So I'm going to give you an explanation for 10 through 1, and then just put 11 through 25 up on the screen. Let's go. At number 10, I've got the Taters. That's right, the Clemson Tigers. Now, Georgia played Clemson week 1 last year, and all offseason, I kind of referred to Clemson as a C- team. It was really just a poor troll attempt at the time. Honestly, I thought it would be cool to buy a Clemson hat, put a minus on it, so I started referring to Clemson as a C- team. Well, little did I know, it ended up being pretty accurate. Clemson had not a bad year or whatever, by any means, but in comparison to the teams that Clemson has had over the last 5 or 6 years, last year was not very good. I've got them coming in at number 10 this year. Now, they got the ukulele coming back. Of course, Dabo Swinney, head coach, They've got to replace both their coordinators. They got to replace some wide receivers. They got a really good running back coming back in Will Shipley. They did lose a lot off the defense, but Clemson has recruited really well over the last 4 or 5 years. Even this recruiting cycle that just ended, one of the worst Clemson has had in the last, 5 to 6 years, but still a pretty good class overall. Clemson is loaded with talent. They obviously lacked last year on the offensive line and the quarterback position. I expect quarterback to be better for Clemson this year, whether that's the ukulele improving from year 1 to year 2, or the freshman they have coming in, Cole Kubelik or whatever his name is. Clemson loves to sign quarterbacks that you can't pronounce their names, right? I mean, the ukulele, his backup was, what was his backup's name this year? Mitsubishi or whatever it was, and Kubelik or whatever it is. I find it hard to believe that Clemson is going to struggle offensively for 2 years in a row, at least not to the extent they did last year. I think Clemson will be better offensively. Defensively, I think losing Brent Venables is a big deal. I mean, let's face it, Clemson fans, you can't spend the better part of the last decade bragging about how you have the best defensive coordinator in all of college football, then lose that guy and act like it's no big deal. I do think it's a big deal. Does it mean Clemson's going to fall off the map? They play in the ACC. There's not a lot of hurdles to jump over in the ACC. I mean, last year, Pitt and Wake were the cream of the crop in the ACC. Pitt loses Kenny Pickett. Wake will be okay. Pitt will probably be okay again, too. They brought a transfer in from Southern Cal, Keaton Slovis. Clemson is still the most talented team in the ACC. Clemson should win the majority of their games, if not all of their games, within the ACC. I think NC State will be really, really good this year. But Clemson will have a chance, like they do every year, to make the ACC title game with a shot at the playoffs. I'm not sure Clemson is at the level right now that they were under Deshaun Watson or Trevor Lawrence. I don't think there's a quarterback on their roster that comes close to either one of those two guys, including the true freshman they have coming in. But Clemson is still a very talented team with a lot of really, really good players. Like I said, it's hard to imagine them struggling as bad as they did last year offensively 2 years in a row. I've got Clemson coming in at number 10. All right, enough of that silly ass tater hat. Now on to number 9. I'm going to stay in the ACC here. I think this is the first time, maybe ever, that I've done a preseason poll like this where Clemson was. I did not have Clemson as the highest ranked team in the ACC, but I've got NC State coming in at number 9. They're a well-coached team. They've got a lot of talent coming back off of a team last year that played really, really well. Probably the 3rd best team in the ACC last year, maybe the 4th best, but they've got a lot coming back. I like NC State's chances this year of making the ACC title game. Now, depending on who they were to match up against in that game, of course, would determine whether or not they could win the ACC and potentially make a playoff. I have a feeling that this may be the 2nd year in a row the ACC misses out on a playoff. I'm not sure, unless Clemson has drastically improved, especially offensively from last year to this year. I'm not sure there's a team in the ACC this season good enough to make the playoffs. I do think NC State and Clemson are the cream of the crop, though I've got them at 10 and 9, respectively. The Wolfpack comes in at number 9. Number 8, I've got Texas A&M. Texas A&M has gotten a lot of attention over the last couple of weeks for the recruiting class that they just signed. Very few freshmen really impact right away. So yes, Texas A&M signed an amazing class this year. I'm not going to get into the whole, the NIL part of that. I made a video on that last week. This is a top 25 ranking video. I'm just going to stick to that. But I've got the Aggies under Jimbo Fisher at number 8. Now, what a lot of people, I don't know if they don't know or they forget or they just don't mention it when they talk about, because I've heard this a lot. Yeah, Texas A&M signed the number 1 class just so they can lose 4 games again. You may be right. And while, yes, this is the best class Texas A&M has ever signed, it's not like they have terrible recruiting classes before this recruiting class they just signed. Texas A&M has been recruiting at a high level going back a couple of coaches. I mean, they've got top 10 finishes almost year after year after year. There's a ton of talent on this team. They've got the quarterback coming back this year that got hurt early in the season last year. Calzada, the Italian Hot Pocket, he has transferred out. He was the backup quarterback to start the year last year, ended up playing the majority of the season after their starter went down. He's back, so he'll be the quarterback this year. Jimbo Fisher, say what you want about him. I'm definitely not Jimbo Fisher's biggest fan. he does have a way to work with quarterbacks. They've had a really good defense for 2 or 3 years in a row. Top 3 defense in the SEC for the last 3 years. Number 1 defense in the SEC 2 years ago. A lot of talent over there. Some really good running backs. They always have big, tall, playmaking wide receivers. I think it'll come down to them for the quarterback position, right? And, of course, they play in a very tough division, the SEC West, with Alabama, LSU, Auburn, Ole Miss, just Arkansas, just a lot of really, really good teams over there. Will Texas A&M lose 4 games for the umpteenth year in a row this coming year? I don't know. It's a fair question to ask. This is not the first time Texas A&M has had a loaded roster. They've had a hard time getting over the hump and winning the SEC West. In fact, they have not won the SEC West since entering the SEC 10 or 11 years ago, whatever it's been. I do think they've got a really, really good team, maybe the second best or second most talented roster in the West behind Alabama. We'll see what kind of magic Jimbo Fisher has this year for the Aggies, but I've got them coming in at number 8 in my preseason poll. At number 7, I bounced this team around everywhere from 5 to 13, working on this ranking this morning before I settled at number 7, Michigan Wolverines. This is a prime example of why I wait until after National Signing Day at least before I do one of these top 25 rankings. For a couple of weeks, it looked like Michigan was going to be searching for a new head coach. Jim Harbaugh was, in consideration for several NFL head coaching jobs. And in fact, and I think this was a terrible decision on Jim Harbaugh's part, but he actually interviewed with the Minnesota Vikings on National Signing Day. That's hard to explain away. That seems disrespectful to me towards Michigan. I do think Michigan is lucky to get him back versus having to look for a new coach. Now, I know before last year, there were a lot of people, Michigan fans included, who had had enough of Jim Harbaugh and were ready to ride him out of town on a rail. However, last year, Michigan was probably the team that overachieved the most. They weren't even ranked in the top 25 in most preseason polls heading into last year, right? They had the 1 loss in the regular season of Michigan State, and really they should have won that game. They were way up in that game, and they sort of blew a lead in the second half. They finally got over the hump and beat Ohio State, and then won the Big Ten title game to punch their ticket to the playoffs, losing in the first round to Georgia, but still a really, really good season for Michigan and Jim Harbaugh. Michigan, like Texas A&M, a team that consistently recruits pretty well. Yeah, they might have an off year here or there, but they're within the top 10, top 15 recruiting nationally every single year, usually second or third in the Big Ten behind Ohio State. And I do think they have the second most talented roster probably in the Big Ten currently behind Ohio State. And I have Michigan as the second highest ranked team from the Big Ten in this preseason poll, but I've got the Michigan Wolverines coming in at number 7. Number 6, I've got Notre Dame. This is the highest ranked team on my list that has a new coach. Changing coaches matters. It does. Changing coaches, it's not as simple as the players just having to call the coach by a different name. I mean, you're talking about different schemes, different philosophies, different personalities, different recruiting tactics, different playbooks, different coordinators. Literally everything changes for a team when you change the head coach, except the players. And sometimes with the transfer portal, sometimes the players change too. Notre Dame has been, under Brian Kelly for the last 10 or 11 years, a consistent top 10 team. I mean, starting and finishing in the top 10 almost every single year. Brian Kelly averaged 10, almost 11 wins a year. While he was at Notre Dame, they failed to ever win the big one, winless. Notre Dame sort of famously winless in major postseason games since 1989. But they're winning 10, 11 games every single year. Changing coaches, we'll see what happens. Now, it's not that they went out and got somebody from the outside. They promoted from within. That's the other issue. The guy's never been a head coach before. This is the first time in school history that Notre Dame has hired a head coach with no head coaching experience. He's currently 0-1 as an interim head coach, Notre Dame losing their bowl game this past December, or New Year's Day, whatever it was, to, was it Oklahoma State that beat them? Anyway, so Notre Dame continued the streak of being unable to win major postseason games. However, this isn't a top 25 ranking of what I think is going to happen next postseason. This is a top 25 ranking of what I think the teams are going to look like heading into the start of the season. And it's hard to make an argument not to have Notre Dame somewhere in the top 10. They're one of the most consistent teams over the last 10 years. Of course, you have, your Alabamas, your Ohio States, your Georgias, your Oklahomas, your Clemsons. Those teams have finished within the top 10 almost every single year. Notre Dame's in that category, at least when it comes to finishing within the top 10. Now, those teams have national titles over the last 5, 6, 7 years. Well, Oklahoma doesn't, and Notre Dame doesn't either. But those teams just seem to consistently win 10-plus games with your occasional off year, right? The last time Georgia didn't win 10 games, 2016. The last time Oklahoma didn't win 10 games, this past season they won 10. Anyway, you get the point what I'm saying. I know a lot of people hate Notre Dame. They won't join a conference, and that makes everybody mad. They brag about a pointless TV deal with NBC that shows 4 home games a year. They think they're better than everybody else. The average Notre Dame fan is 62 years old and, wants to talk about black and white TV and Rudy. I get all that. You have to set your hate aside. Notre Dame has finished in the top 10 almost every single year. They've started in the top 10 almost every single year. They're likely to start this season in the top 10. They're likely to end this season in the top 10. Would I pick Notre Dame to win the national title? No, but I would definitely bet money right now that Notre Dame finishes in the top 10. I've got them at number 6. All right, time for the top 5. I'd have to go back and look, but this might not... I know this is the highest I've ever had this team ranked in the preseason. This might be the highest I've ever had this team ranked, period, at any point in the season. I've got Utah at number 5. Now, this is the culmination of several factors here that led me to putting Utah at number 5. Normally, you go back the last few years, Oregon would be the team out of the Pac-12 that if you were looking to put into the top 10 in a preseason, you'd try to figure out where in the top 10 you're going to put Oregon. Too many question marks right now for me to have Oregon in my top 10. Brand new coach, quarterback issues, again, losing their best 2 defensive players to the NFL. Just a lot of question marks around Oregon, so I eliminated them from my top 10 right away. And that fits nicely for Utah. I mean, they beat Oregon twice convincingly last year. You look in the Pac-12 as a whole, it's sort of like the ACC. There's not a lot of hurdles a team has to jump over in the Pac-12 to win 10 or 11 games. You start thinking about, good teams in the Pac-12, Oregon almost every year, Utah almost every year, Southern Cal, well, they're coming off their worst season in 30 years. Yes, they got a new coach in Lincoln Riley. Yes, they're bringing in Caleb Williams and a bunch of other talent. How much is that going to matter year one? I mean, I do think Southern Cal will be better in 2022 than they were in 2021, but how much better? Utah, consistent. They're one of the best coached teams every year in all of college football. Their head coach is one of those guys, you hear this expression all the time, he gets the most out of the talent he has available. That's Utah. You're not going to see Utah in the top 5 or 10 of any recruiting rankings, ever. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to see Utah putting 15 or 20 players a year into the NFL, ever. It's just not going to happen. But what they do have is a lot of 4th, 5th, and 6th-year seniors, COVID giving players an extra year of eligibility, and they're very well coached, and they play in a very, very winnable division, the Pac-12 South. Arizona State, they seem to be floating around, not really wanting to take the next step. Southern Cal's been in purgatory for a decade, worst season in 30 years last year. I think it makes sense to have Utah somewhere in your top 10 because I think they're the cream of the crop. I think in the Pac-12, maybe 5 is a little too high. You can bump them down a couple of notches. Okay, I get it. But I've got Utah coming in at number 5. All right, now it's time for the top 4. I've got Oklahoma State at number 4. Oklahoma State came very close to making the playoffs last year, and this could be the year they get in. In fact, if you're looking for a team, and people like to talk about this all the time, is there a team that's never made the playoffs that has a good chance of making it for the first time this year? Oklahoma State might be that team. Utah, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, a lot of hurdles for Texas A&M to jump over. NC State, I don't know. Every other team in my top 10 has made the playoffs before. If I had to place money today on a team that's never made the playoffs to make it in 2022, that team would probably be Oklahoma State. They return almost their entire offense. People still like to sort of pick and poke at their head coach Gundy for the I'm a man, I'm 40 thing, and then he had a mullet for no reason for a few years, and he is a little bit of an odd character, but he's been there a long time. He's run a consistent program now for a long time. By consistent, I mean like consistently 8-4. But I do feel like they took a step forward last year. An argument could be made that they were the best team in the Big 12 last year. Of course, Arguments don't matter when you see results on the field. But Oklahoma State's got a lot coming back. They're consistent at the coaching staff. I think Oklahoma State is probably the team with the best chance to make the playoffs of all the teams that have never made the playoffs before. Oklahoma is going to take a step back. I mean, Brent Venables, we don't know. He's a great defensive coordinator. We don't know how he's going to be as a head coach. The other problem is, okay, that's great. You bring in a defensive head coach. If you're Oklahoma and Brent Venables, that's probably going to make your defense better. But Oklahoma's roster is built to run Lincoln Riley's offense. And I don't think anybody can run Lincoln Riley's offense other than Lincoln Riley. I mean, Lincoln Riley is one of the smartest offensive minds on the planet. There's a reason the NFL wants Lincoln Riley really, really bad. So I think Oklahoma takes a step back. Texas is still wandering the desert. Who knows about them? Baylor was good last year. Can they be that good again? West Virginia, they're a 7-8 win team, it looks like. I mean, who else is out there really in the Big 12 to challenge Oklahoma State? Texas, Texas Tech, TCU, Kansas State, West Virginia. I mean, I think Oklahoma State's probably the class of the Big 12, at least on paper, heading into the season. We'll see what Oklahoma looks like once the season starts. But I've got Oklahoma State coming in at number 4. All right, now it's time to start making people mad. It's time for my top 3. Let me say this first. I've been doing this 7 or 8 years, okay? It never fails. I do this preseason poll, right? Georgia won the national championship last season, okay? If I don't put the team at number 1 that won the national title the year before, I get 100 comments that say, until somebody beats the champs, you got to leave them at number 1. And I've been arguing and disagreeing with those people for the entire 7 or 8 years I've been doing this. A preseason poll for 2022 is not based off of who won a national title last season. Alabama won the national title in 2020. I had Oklahoma ranked number 1 in my preseason 2021 poll, which shows you what an idiot I am. LSU won the national title in 2019. Anybody with a brain, anybody that could barely fog a mirror, knew LSU was going to be nowhere near the team in 2020 that they were in 2019, but yet I still got the comments. You should have LSU number 1 until someone beats them. No. Yes. During the season, if a team is ranked number 1, they should probably stay number 1 until someone beats them. Yes. But a preseason poll for 2022 has got nothing to do with 2020. With that being said, I've got Georgia at number 3. I'm not going to put Georgia number 1 for a 2022 poll just because they won the national title in 2021. Yes, I'm a huge Georgia fan. I live and die with the Dogs, and nobody was happier than Uncle Lou to see Georgia win a national title. The first one since I was 2 years old. Okay? I love Georgia. And I'm going to get called a fake fan and everything else for not having Georgia at number 1. Guess what? I don't care. I don't give 2 hoots or a holler. I've been called a fake fan since the day I got on here. It doesn't matter to me. I think Georgia is a really, really, really good team, again, in 2022. A lot of returning pieces, especially on offense. Quarterback returns. I'm just going to skip over that part. We got 2 really good running backs returning, right? Kendall Milton, Kenny McIntosh. Plus, we've got Dijon Edwards, who was sort of the cleanup guy last year, late in the 4th quarter. And I really like Branson Robinson, the true freshman that's coming in from Mississippi. The guy's built like a dump truck. All of our wide receivers return with the exception of George Pickens and Jermaine Burton. Pickens off to the NFL, Burton off to Alabama. But, Kearis Jackson, Dominic Blaylock, Ladd McConkey, A.D. Mitchell. Of course, Brock Bowers at tight end, Darnell Washington at tight end. Eric Gilbert is back with the team, who could maybe be moved to wide receiver, I guess, if you believe what people were saying last year about him. And on defense, yeah, Georgia loses a lot, and particularly at the inside linebacker position. I don't see any way possible Georgia is anywhere near as good at the inside linebacker position as they were last year with Nakobe Dean, Channing Tindall, and Quay Walker. Yes, they've got a lot of talent there, but it's going to be hard to match the production this coming year that we got from our inside linebackers this past season. Defensive line, we lose some there too. Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, Trayvon Walker. I'm less concerned about the defensive line. Georgia rotated a lot of defensive linemen in and out last year. I'm really high on Georgia's defensive line again in 2022. And I think the secondary will be even better than what it was last year. We lose Darion Kendrick and Lewis Seen, but we get Tyke Smith back. We get Keely Ringo back, who had the game-winning pick six in the national title game. I think the secondary will actually be improved and a little better than what it was last year. Defensive line, I think, will be about the same. Inside linebacker probably takes a step back. But Georgia's a really, really, really good team. They play in the SEC East. Florida is still in the toilet. Tennessee, I think, is probably better than they have been in the last few years, but they're not on Georgia's level and shouldn't be competing with them. Auburn is an absolute dumpster fire right now. We play them every year from the West. Kentucky is probably the second best team in the East. I just don't have a whole lot of concerns about Georgia's schedule in the regular season. At Kentucky might be Georgia's toughest game. We get Auburn at home. We get Florida at a neutral site. We do have to play Mississippi State, so, the Mike Leach offense. So we'll see there. Georgia's schedule is very favorable. They open up with Oregon, brand new head coach. I can't see Oregon coming down to Atlanta and beating Georgia in Dan Lanning's first game ever. So it sets up for Georgia to have a really, really good regular season. Again, 12-0, 11-1 type of season and win the East. And then, of course, if you do that, you're one game away, the SEC championship game, from making the playoffs. So I think having Georgia, well, first of all, if you don't have Georgia in your top four, then you're just a blind hater or something. There's just no logical reason or explanation not to have Georgia somewhere in your top four. They've recruited in the top three 6 years in a row. 2 of those years, they had the number 1 class. They're just loaded with talent at every single position, including quarterback. We'll see what Kirby does there this year. Stetson's coming back. You got Brock Vandergriff waiting in the wings. You bring in Gunnar Stockton as a true freshman. So there's a lot of talent there. If you don't have Georgia in the top 4, then you don't know what you're doing, or you just hate me, or you hate Georgia. But I've got Georgia at number 3. So that's the first thing that's going to make people mad. Continuing the trend here. At number 2, I've got Alabama. I've got Alabama at number 2, and I'll be the first to admit you can have them at number 1, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I've got Ohio State then at number 1. To me, Ohio State and Alabama should be 1 and 2 in every single poll. I'm not even going to argue about the order. If you can tell me I'm wrong and Alabama should be number 1, and I'll say, okay, that's fine. It's very hard for me to differentiate right now between Ohio State and Alabama in terms of who should be 1 and who should be 2. Alabama's got the Heisman-winning quarterback returning in Bryce Young. He loses his top 3 wide receivers, though, and a couple of running backs. So you got a lot to replace offensively. They lose. Also, the best offensive lineman has gone off to the NFL. So there's a lot to replace offensively for Alabama. I mentioned they brought Jermaine Burton in from the portal, got him from Georgia. They've got some young wide receivers, but if you listen to any Alabama fans, they're not any good, because that's what Alabama fans blame the national title loss on, is those wide receivers who are going to be starting for Alabama this coming year. So, could they get better over the course of an offseason? Of course they could. But I think Alabama, like they do a lot of years, has a lot of question marks, particularly this year on offense, outside of Bryce Young. Bryce Young is a constant. You know what you're going to get from him. He's probably the favorite to win the Heisman again next year. If he's not, it's the Ohio State quarterback, which is one of the reasons I have these two teams at 1 and 2. I don't have any questions about Alabama defensively either. Will Anderson comes back, who the argument could be made was the best defensive player in all of college football last year. So, and it's Nick Saban. They're going to have a top 10, top 15 defense at the worst. I don't think anybody would argue with that. So if you want to put Alabama at 2, I've got no problem with it. I've got them, if you want to put them at 1, I've got no problem with them. With that, I've got them at 2. I think the Alabama-Texas A&M game will be really, really good. We'll see what Brian Kelly does at LSU. Where does Sam Pittman have Arkansas, Lane Kiffin, and Ole Miss? There's some landmines for Alabama to navigate through in the regular season. See if they can do it, but I've got them number 2 in my post-national signing day. Way too early, ridiculous, pointless, top 25. And, of course, that leaves Ohio State at number 1. C.J. Stroud, Travion Henderson. That's really what did it for me. Might be the best quarterback, running back combination in all of college football coming up for 2022. People are going to say, well, Ohio State's losing, a couple of those great wide receivers. That's true, but Ohio State is absolutely loaded at the wide receiver position. Emeka Egbuka, whatever his name is, the guy hardly even got on the field last year. Everything coming out of high school. The number 1 wide receiver recruit a couple of years ago. Marvin Harrison's kid is on that team. They're just absolutely loaded still at the wide receiver position. Question marks for me for Ohio State is sort of the opposite of Alabama. Alabama, my question marks are kind of offensively. Who's going to run the ball? and who's going to catch the ball, right? With Ohio State, my questions are more on the defensive side. And it's not necessarily about who they lost or who they have coming back. Their defense just, the last couple of years, Ohio State's defense, to me, just hasn't been what we're used to seeing Ohio State's defense be. And that's, I guess that's a knock on Ohio State. I don't, some Ohio State fans maybe are going to get mad about me saying that, but I hear from Ohio State fans all the time that tell me the same thing. I mean, look at Ohio State's, you can make the argument last year that Ohio State had the best offense in football. They didn't even win their division. Why? Defense. So it's the Ohio State defense that has to get better. They've made some changes, some coaching and position changes defensively. Their recruiting is insane every single year. Look, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, those three teams, when it comes to recruiting, have separated themselves from everyone else. I know Texas A&M had the great class this year, but Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia, I mean, how far back do you have to go to find a year when one of them didn't have a top 5 class? I mean, it's just a machine with those three schools when it comes to recruiting. So Ohio State is absolutely loaded with talent. That hasn't been the problem on defense. It's been execution and maybe X's and O's. So maybe some changes coaching-wise will help there. You know, Michigan had a great year last year, and I have them in my top 10, but, you know, I'm going to be honest. If I had to pick the Ohio State-Michigan game right now, I'd pick Ohio State. Now, that doesn't mean Michigan's going to lose. I'm not trying to make Michigan fans mad by saying that. I just feel like Ohio State is one of the top 2 or 3 most talented teams in the country. I think they've got one of the best quarterbacks in the country. They're loaded at wide receiver. They've got probably the best running back in the country. He was a true freshman last year, Travion Henderson. The guy's just absolutely unbelievable. If they can improve even a little bit defensively, I think they're going to be very tough to beat for anybody. Regular season, conference title game, playoffs, whatever. And those are the reasons I've got Ohio State at 1 over number 2, Alabama. But like I said, you want to put Alabama no 1. I've got no problem. You can take this top 3, Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia, in my opinion, shuffle them up any way you want, and I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I may have some reasons I disagree, but I'm not going to tell you, no, you're wrong, I'm right. To me, Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia should be everybody's top 3. The order would be the only thing that's up for debate. All right, there you go. That's my top 10. I'm going to put 11 through 25 on the screen now, so you have even more reasons to get mad. Have a good morning.